Welcome back to another episode of Relatively Damaged Live. My name is Angela.
And I'm Kat.
The live shows are currently streamed on Mondays to Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, and wherever else we put it. I think Twitter is one other place. Who knows? It's a lot of places. You can find us. So if you like what we talk about, remember to subscribe and share with your friends. Kat and I are going to talk today for about 30 minutes on how certain are you? Is it helpful to be certain of our judgments? And this is, I'm like, this is a fantastic show for Kat today because, she has her own show, Breaking the Lens of Bias. So, yeah, let's get to it.
Yeah, I've got to say that it is the more certain I've been of things. Um, there have been times where I've been right, but there has also been times when I've been wrong.
Yeah, yeah.
And the really interesting that I found is that the certainty of a judgment on anything leaves no room for exploration, for curiosity, for other opinions or anything else. And so it's been kind of an interesting journey to change that, because I can be very opinionated about things in all honesty. But I will say, from doing my own show, it really has made me look at issues in a different way and really think about the biases that I hold, and especially confirmation bias.
Mm, yeah, we were just talking actually a little bit about that before the show started, about an experience I had last week after going into a classroom to teach some kids some heart rhythm meditation techniques and things like that. That my initial uh, judgment was that it didn't go well. And what I realized was that was based on an emotion. And I had been struggling to keep myself regulated as I had gotten some challenging news the day before that I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with. And when I made that judgment because things weren't going exactly to plan, I think is really what happened. I think I wanted people to behave a certain way in order to validate that I was doing a good job. So I had gotten in the car and I was telling my caregiver, "Hey, this is what happened, or this is how I feel about it." And then I caught myself in the story of the confirmation bias. And I said, "Well, hold on, let me describe what I saw instead of just assuming that my conclusion was correct." And as I started describing what I saw in the classroom from a very maybe detached perspective, what I realized is that it had gone fine and the kids were participating. And I came to realize that it was my emotion that was dictating how I thought it went. So at that point in time, that emotion wasn't super helpful to me.
Yeah, and let's not even talk about opinions about issues that are going on in the world or whatever, that we may hold on, a variety of issues. But I think you go to a really good point, is that when we have those judgments about things, we oftentimes put ourselves into that. It's hard to look dispassionately at something when we're in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was talking with someone several times over the weekend who's dealing with a breakup, and so I could say this person is my friend. I could say, yes, the other party did all this shitty stuff to you, and and yeah, she's a horrible person and things like that. But the reality of it is that really helpful? Because that's kind of confirming, her opinion on things, but then going through and saying, well, yes, that action may have been, yeah, pretty shitty, but where is it coming from? Why is this happening? Who do you want to be? Do you want to be stuck in that place where you're angry and hurt and frustrated, or do you want to move past it and decide how you're going to reconcile all this?
Yeah. It, and
Um,
that's really hard with those emotions in there. And like the emotion of the judgment sometimes will carry us so far, and it can be dangerous. I never had really thought about things like that as being dangerous. You know,
um,
Jane.
Dangerous in so many ways. It's damaging to relationships. It's dangerous for your own thought, your own well-being. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it just gets us into a cycle where we go down and down and down and down and down.
Yeah.
And living in that uncertainty, living with the ideas, you know what, I might be wrong about this.
Yeah,
Let
which
me
is
take
yeah, which is like that I don't know world, which can also be scary, right? Yeah, it can just be scary. But I have to be careful about reinforcing that something happened and my earbuds are gone, so I can't hear you again.
Oh no.
I heard them disconnect.
Uh,
Okay. Uh hang on. I'm going to try
well,
and fix this.
okay, I'm going to read the quote while you do that. I know Angela can't hear me, but we do have a quote. So let me bring it up here on my phone if it wants to do that. Okay. So this is a quote from Adam Grant. Is If you view our show often, you know that he is one of our uh, favorite people to quote. It says, "Being judgmental is not about how quickly you form opinions; it's how certain you are of them. Strong convictions from weak info reflect arrogance. Holding views lightly and revising them rapidly reveals humility. Wisdom often ends in a question mark, not an exclamation point." So while we're waiting for Angela to go back in, I'll just comment on this a little bit. This is kind of exactly what we were talking about. That you may quickly form an opinion, especially if you're basing it on an emotional kind of reaction to something. That this is good, this is bad, whatever. But I hope you can hear me, Angela. Still no? Okay, she went back out again. But it's the certainty of it. So if you say this is bad and you leave no room for change in your perception, especially if you're dealing with a very a situation where it's an emotionally charged situation, you don't necessarily leave room for the other person or people to change. Can you hear me now? Okay. I just read our quote and I was reflecting on it.
Awesome.
I figured that was a good place to do it. So I was talking. You have the quote, so you know what we're talking about. So I was just talking about the certainty of the opinion is what is problematic. And I
Mm.
love at the end of this quote where it says, "Wisdom often ends in a question mark, not an exclamation point."
Yeah. And I think that's so true because it allows me to change my mind. And I've been doing a lot of thinking about being in stressful situations and only seeing that tunnel vision because our emotions go so high and then we can only see what we think is the solution. And another quote that I wanted to add in today is like it's by Joe Dispenza. It says reinforcing new information that shows us that what we think should be impossible is indeed possible helps us remind ourselves that there's more to reality than what our senses perceive. And so it's like I'm combating, for those of you that heard what I was, the moment of last week where I thought by emotion that what I had seen happen in the classroom as I'm trying to teach heart rhythm meditation, my emotion said, "Oh, it didn't go well." But when I looked back by detaching myself from it to like, okay, let me just notice what happened. Then I was able to look at, okay, right now my emotion is saying this, reality is saying this when I look at all of these things that actually did happen. And so using one to kind of combat the other, because it's really easy for confirmation bias to lock us into, like, I could have, instead of excuse me, instead of challenging that thought, I could have just gone with it and said, well, these kids were doing this and they weren't doing this and they weren't doing this. And instead, I challenged it, which was super helpful to me. I think it felt helpful. I felt better, actually.
Well, and that's the thing is, I mean, as you were coming in, you had that judgment of the situation, but you allowed yourself to step back and do that. Sometimes the situations that we find ourselves in are dynamic, um,
Mm-hmm.
meaning there, something happens, we react, something else happens, we react. A lot of times with interpersonal relationships. And so, so making that judgment and sticking to it, being certain of that, allows you no room to grow, allows the other person no room to grow and change. It
Right.
closes off the evolution of it. And so, that's, I mean, that's some of the stuff. I just say this. I was talking about in politics, and this is a big thing in Illinois. There's this Safety Act that's going on, and people are like, oh, it's going to be okay. It's misrepresented, and other people are like, oh, it's going to be horrible. And so, instead of saying, you know what, okay, this is where we're at right now, let's stop and look. And of course, in a charged political situation, when you're running for office, I understand that that's the biases that you're bringing into the political discussion. The problem is that that doesn't serve us when we're actually in a place to make those laws. You have to be open to the possibilities to be able to say, you know what, we're kind of trying something new. We think it will work. This is what it says, and other people are coming from their own biases saying it won't work. Instead of being at these diametric poles, it's better to come together and to say, okay, how can we make this work? How can we make this the best possible outcome for everyone? And
Mm-hmm.
that's where being open, that I have this opinion based on my understanding of things, my experience, because each of us brings something unique to situations. But it also, when you look at the perspectives of things, I mean, I'm sure you've seen the one with a 6 and a 9, and one person standing on top or bottom, and the other person is the opposite. So depending on their perspective, depends on how they see that as a 6 or a 9.
Oh, got it. Got it. Got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it does.
Oh,
That's a long, long time ago. I made this quote. It went, perception and perspective are the deciding factors which lead to choice. Because I realized, it does depend on where I am in a room when I see an event happen. And then if I have to make a decision based on that event, how am I going to perceive it? What's the history of my thought processes? How did I come to that conclusion? And if I'm already certain that, let's say I see an event between two people and I'm certain one's a jerk and I'm certain the other one's not, then how am I going to perceive that, even if it's not a a conflicting event, right? Like, let's say there's not let's just say one person was highly emotional in it and the other one maybe wasn't, and I'm going to make some decisions and I'm going to decide I'm certain because of my beliefs. So I have to be really careful about what it is I believe, even about people, places, things, events, because I may be interpreting them wrong, not wrong, but in a way that's not helpful.
yeah. And I mean, I'll give you another example from my life. There was this job that um, I had applied for and I interviewed for, and they called me back for a second interview, and I'm like, yes, I got this job, and it was the perfect job for me. So I thought it took my skills and abilities along with my passion and would have allowed me to do that. And so I go through this whole process, and I get this call, and basically they said, well, we decided to go with the internal candidate. We honestly didn't think that we would find someone as qualified outside of our organization who knew this stuff, but ultimately we decided to go with the devil we knew, kind of thing. I At the time I was devastated, but again, perspective, by being open to the perspective of it, so I stayed where I was. Within like 5 years, that whole division was disbanded. So I would have lost that job. By staying where I was at, I was able to retire early.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that so looking at it at the time, I was just like, this was the job for me. This was the perfect thing. And then looking back, I'm just like, no, things happen the way they happen, and now I'm grateful for that, because I
Right.
wouldn't have had these the ability to be where I'm at today.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what may be true today may not be true tomorrow. I mean, that's also another aspect of it.
Yeah. And that's bringing up in me this question, can we be grateful for those obstacles and for those challenges, and how to do that in that moment? Can I? Yeah, I know I can. Will I don't, that's probably another another question. But I'm kind of wondering, how have I shifted that perspective, and how could I explain it to someone else? How could I explain that being grateful for the obstacle, or being grateful for something that I didn't get because I was so certain that it was exactly what I needed and that my judgment was right and they are wrong, and vice versa? How did I shift over to, well, maybe I could be wrong. Maybe there is something better. Maybe there's a possibility of something better than what I had even judged as good, right? I mean, the lottery is coming up again today for the almost $2 billion. And, how many people are out there thinking, if only I had that money? And then not, and then when they get it, or if they get it, thinking, not understanding how to manage it or spend it, and then losing it all. How many people, there is the curse of the lottery, I think is what it's called. Or
Yeah.
something like that.
Um, yeah. And it's so funny that you bring that up, because, Michelle and I were talking about, well, what if we wanted, okay, this is what we do, because we know we would not want that much money. That would just be ridiculous. So we're like, okay, we're going to take enough to make sure that we're comfortable,
Mhm.
pay off our debts, take care of ourselves in a reasonable way. But the majority of the money, we decided we were going to set up a foundation,
Mm, yeah.
and and let the money go out that way, to share it with, um, with the rest of the world, or at least as insofar as that we can influence it. But that's an awareness, I think, that we both have, of how that would change us, because people play the lottery thinking that, oh yeah, this is going to change my life. I'm going to have all this money and all my problems will be solved.
No, there's just different problems.
Exactly.
But the judgment, I mean, that's
um,
like the saying, the grass is greener on the other side. No, it's just different. Like, like if I make that judgment, then I'm putting myself into a predicament that says not this but that.
right. And I mean, that just kind of goes to, you don't know the struggles that other people go through.
Right.
They may not have the same struggles, that we do. Sometimes I look at people who have more, and I'm like, yeah, but at what cost?
Right.
that I have the time on a Monday afternoon that I'm retired early and I can sit down here and or Monday morning and have this discussion with you. That to me is and share it with the world is so much more important than having, more than I have in terms of material goods.
Right.
And so, you know, that's that works for me. I talk to people who work endless hours, and they're working 16-hour days. I'm like, I wouldn't want that life.
Yeah. That's a hard. Yeah, and some people might really love that, right? And they might find peace in that. Uh, Maybe they won't. I don't know, but I think my perspective, I think, is if we're all here to learn and grow, that there's going to be challenges regardless of what I have. I can, maybe it's a little easier with money, maybe it's not. Maybe there are just more challenges to overcome, or different challenges to overcome, right?
Yeah, yeah. I would I would think that. And
Well, remember Schitt's Creek, right? They lost all their money because someone stole it.
right.
I love that show.
You and a lot of other people. Oh, it's hilarious. But yeah, I mean that's it exactly. And finding the finding the peace and the pleasure in the moment is what's, I think, the sweet spot
Yeah.
is learning to live in that. So if, going back to our question, if I'm constantly in that state of judging things, judging situations, judging my life, judging what I have and what I don't have, comparing, well, that person must be better than me because they have more, or that person must be better than me because they're more accomplished by societal standards, whatever.
Mhm.
I'm not living in the now. I'm not living in that present moment. And maybe that's a judgment in and of itself. Maybe people like to live there. But I have lived there.
Mhm.
And you know, being open to the experience of whatever it is, I think is, I can make the judgment on this moment. I can't tell you what's going to happen tomorrow. And the past is in the past. It can only inform how I think today. That's where I'm
Well,
trying to live, and that's where it helps to be in that judgment free zone.
exact. Oh man, and it's so hard, right? And this has been something I've been constantly thinking of, especially working to live in the I don't know world. If I'm certain that this is how it needs to happen and this is how it's going to happen, then I close the door to any other possibility, which could be better. And then I don't know, but then I don't know about it, and I could be basically operating from old subconscious routines in my body, right? Like, or in my mind, that I don't even realize I'm operating from if I just shut it down. Like, how do I know? How do I know? And that's where it's for me, utilizing prayer and meditation. It has become so important to me, for me to really try to get to that place and understand what are my subconscious choices and behaviors, what what is working for me, what isn't working for me. But also, one of the most important things that I have realized in I think it's just been the last year, and I think we've talked about it before. I don't know if it was on here, but is that in that moment, in this moment right now, I don't know what's going to happen next. But when things get disrupted, it's only predictable. It's more predictable than if it weren't. But all of a sudden, if a surprise happens in my life, or someone makes a decision that I was certain they weren't going to make, or they change their mind, right? Now all of a sudden, I'm forced into the I don't know world, and I've got to live there. And I think that's really interesting that we're in it all the time, we just don't realize it.
Right. Exactly. I mean, last week we for those of you who know, we do a meditation. We were in our meditation on Sunday, and I was just like, oh, I'll see you tomorrow. And then I get the text from you, and it's like, I'm sick. I can't do the show.
Yeah.
And, because I hadn't expected it, you seemed fine on Sunday, and it was just like,
Mhm.
"Oh, okay," you know? And, I was like, "All right, let me
Yeah.
know if I can do anything," kind of thing. And,
Yeah.
um
And thank you for that. That was
oh,
fantastic
always,
and so
always.
helpful.
Um, but that's what living in the moment allows me to be. It's like, "Oh, okay. All right."
Yeah, 'cause
You know?
yeah, I mean, years ago, I would have gotten if I were had been the one on the other side, right? I would have been mad or frustrated, like, "Oh, crap, we were gonna do this," instead of just, "Oh, I guess we're not doing that today." But that for me took for those of you that used to watch us before, the green screen, I had a sign, hanging up on my wall. It said, "Stay curious," and right underneath it, it said, "How will I be surprised today?" And that really helped to train me into seeing that because I think I was afraid of surprises. I didn't like them because it used to be that they were the ones that I didn't like, or my perception was, or my judgment was that a surprise wasn't good because usually if it was surprising, it wasn't good to me. And so when I started being surprised about anything and everything that didn't go as planned, I was able to start kind of getting excited about what was coming because then I was actually in a more relaxed mood and I could see things differently from how I used to see them. And now I wasn't living in blame and victimization. It was just, oh, okay, I guess I need to do something different now. I don't always know what that is. Sometimes it is scary, but if I can stay out of victim and blame, then I am way ahead of the ball game because again, I'm staying out of that thinking or how do I want it? That emotional, stressed out, dysregulated mindset, which puts me in the tunnel. And I'm going out to, oh, well, that's possible, that's possible, that's possible, that's possible. Okay, which way do I need to go? Now I have more choices. Oh, okay. Whew. Maybe it's not going to be as bad as I thought it was.
Yeah. It's so funny that you say that because your mind can always go to that place. It's so easy to be deceptive by your mind to say, "Okay, I'm going to go to that place
Mm-hmm.
where my mind is to do that." It's like the thought comes in. And the question is again the certainty. Are you going to be certain of that thought that comes in, or are you just going to realize that that's just one of the 70,000 thoughts that you think every day?
Right.
You know, and it's what you hold on to. So being in that uncertainty. I love how you said that. When I was a kid, I'll just say this real quick.
Yeah.
I used to I figured out mom was Santa Claus, and so I would figure out all the hiding places. So I knew before Christmas what I was getting. And the one year I wanted a 10-speed bike. This is way back in the day there. And that was like the big thing to have. And now keep in mind this is December in Chicago. You don't not generally ride bikes December in Chicago. Um and so they managed to keep that a surprise and got me a 10-speed bike.
Oh, wow. And you were certain you weren't getting it then because it was a
Yeah, I
surprise.
figure, oh, I'll get it in the spring maybe, or I'll have to save my money up, from babysitting, whatever. And that they got that bike for me. I mean, oh my God. And then of course we had a beautiful day. There was snow on the ground, but the streets were cleared, and so I could go out and ride that bike because it was warm enough as long as I was bundled correctly. And remembering that excitement from the unknown and just receiving this great thing is that. Now the hard part is when the bad things come that are unknown, or what we would judge as bad, a bad experience, a bad situation, um, you know,
Yeah.
but it's all okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
And
and,
that's
and
hard. That
realizing,
can be tough to get there, though.
oh yeah, yeah, in the moment, especially if you have a certainty of the way things are going to happen, and then something happens to to throw you off. It's pretty difficult, but I think you and I agree on that it's better to live and be surprised.
Well, I've been there. I've been to that place where things didn't go as planned, and grief and trauma and things like that impact that, and it's really easy to get stuck in those emotions. And then, because the body is so used to the chemicals that come from those emotions, when we create an emotion, the chemicals are released in our bodies, or vice. I can't remember what happens first. Usually the thought happens first, but the we can become addicted to those emotions, and that is hard to step away from, and it feels awkward and weird. So I just want to say to anyone who's attempting to change or trying to change and wanting to do things differently, that it will feel awkward and weird, and that is actually really good, because it says something's changing. So I would be a cheerleader for you and say, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. I know it sucks right now. I know it's hard to feel awkward and weird. I know it's so difficult to live in the I don't know world. And I'm still going to cheer you on to do it, because it is a happier place to be. So, with that,
Sure. We will close it out.
yeah, I'm Angela,
And I'm Kat.
and we'll see you next week.